Hi, this is On Imagination with the Zoroastrian and Cthulhu School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Oh yeah, that's not going to get old, ever. All right, so we're going to talk about Solomon, because holy shit. So, when I studied education, I tracked it back to the first university ever. And I also looked at the first university after the Dark Ages began. And I tracked it to the development and history of education in general. And the very first findings of any and all knowledge was and is King Solomon. Now, the most interesting thing about King Solomon is because of all the parts of the Bible, this is the only part that is referred to as a legend. Now, that in the bardic world is a big curiosity. When something is a legend, it means that there is truth in there. There's truth. You just got to figure out which parts. If it's called a legend, there's truth somewhere. For instance, King Arthur and the Knights and the Round Table. That's a legend, and there's stuff there. There's legit stuff there. And that's actually something I'm studying right now is King Arthur and pulling it all out to try and figure out where the truth is. And that's actually very telling. There's a lot. So when you have like the legend of the lost city of Atlantis, that's a legend. There is enough information that tells you, oh, that definitely is true. And now it's just a matter of trying to figure out which parts were doctored, which parts were. And ironically, whenever I do research in legends, turns out most of it's true. It's quite extraordinary to see how that is like, it's interesting when we start to use the word legend versus mythology. It's really fascinating when you start to see the words changing things. So there's the legends of King Solomon, and then there's what's written in the Bible. And what's written in the Bible reflects very closely to the legends. But then there were a few things that were completely separate. Like you find it in history books. You find it in the Middle East's history books. You find it in the Quran. You find it in other religions. I don't know if the Quran mentions Solomon specifically. I cannot remember right now. But as you study corresponding religious texts around this region, King Solomon's name comes up a lot. And one of the things that I was huge on doing was studying the sources of magic. Freya was a source. King Solomon was a source. I'm going to say the Sami are a source. However, the Sami had influence from Freya, or the Freya influenced the Sami. They may have just grown parallel right next to each other. The Sami are the Norwegian natives, native Norwegian. They are indigenous to Norway. Well, yeah, they would be the first indigenous people. And then later the petty kingdoms came in and rose up. So the Sami predate the petty kingdoms of Norway from like the Vikings and on. However, the Sami are still here today. And they suffered much of the same abuse as the Native Americans did, except their government apologized to them and preserved their culture. So then another source of magic is Ireland. And Zoroaster. Now, Zoroaster gets you into the Magi. That's where the word comes from. Magus, Magi, mage. The word magic itself comes from Zoroaster. Why didn't I see this? That they have naming rights. Of course they have naming rights. It comes from them. Zoroaster was taught by King Solomon. Zoroaster Well, that was his Greek name. His other name is Zarathustra. And he was taught by King Solomon. Well, not directly. Well, maybe directly. But King Solomon basically composed a temple. You've heard of King Solomon's temple. Now, prior to King Solomon, there were no temples. And when you actually study what a temple was, what King Solomon's temple was, King Solomon's temple was actually a university. It was not a place of worship. Well, I need to clarify. To worship means to learn. When you worship something, you learn it. A place of worship is a place of learning. So this is where there's the original meaning, the original text, what everyone actually did, and then all the garbage that people put on top of it to change it. And when you allow the garbage, when you don't have a strict standard set, the garbage comes in and then it breaks down what you have. So it's really important that you keep the garbage away from what you've got. The garbage is anything but the truth. So King Solomon, when he built his temple, he was actually building a university. It had a school, it had a museum. And what he did was he actually accumulated everything. He accumulated supplies, resources, museum, knowledge. He had scribes. And it was literally a full working university dedicated to study and learning and wisdom. And he incorporated his own wisdom inside this museum knowledge scribe. Now, how his university was different was when we have universities today, we have the professors. And then everything sort of revolves around the classes and the subjects. You are going to usually have clubs, you're going to have all these different things, but they went a step further with having a museum included. They had a library included. A lot of universities do have libraries, or I'm sorry, universities do have libraries. Dublin's is fucking extraordinary. The University of Dublin's library is like one of the most, not only that, but there are ancient texts located in these universities. So it's also an archive. And from there, it also became a book museum, literally a book museum. So it was a place that housed all wisdom and knowledge. It was extraordinary. It was absolutely extraordinary. And the other time we see this temple that King Solomon built replicated is in Alexandria. Alexandria's university was almost identical. So far, I'm seeing absolutely no difference or no variation from Solomon's temple. Solomon's temple and the University of Alexandria are like copies of each other. Well, Alexandria would be a copy of Solomon's temple. So the wisdom that came from King Solomon, and this is where, according to legend, King Solomon told, well, he wanted to rule his people fairly and properly. So he prayed to God, and God was so moved by his request that, according to the story, he came down and personally granted his wish. So he gave him all of wisdom and knowledge. And then King Solomon went on, according to the Bible, to reign one of the most amazingly peaceful, prosperous, abundant cultures ever. And as he did that, he built the temple and he trained people. And the people who came from that temple were called Zoroastrian. The Zoroastrian from Zoroaster, Zarathustra, who graduated from the temple, basically founded, and it's not, I'm going to say it's a religion, but it's really not. It's absolutely just, there is no deity. So technically it's not a religion, but a religion is a lifestyle that you practice religiously. The problem is the concept of religion today has been so tainted. It's unusable. It doesn't mean the original word. The original word means devout, as in sticking to the routine and being committed to it every single day. So it was a devotion. or a commitment. And that is exactly what it started off as, was just a devotion or a commitment with a set standard of wisdom above all, knowledge and truth above all. And that is the Zoroastrian religion. That is what Zarathustra taught. And the Zoroasters, this was in the year about 1000 BCE. And then it was around the year 600 BCE that they took this information to ancient Greece. Now, when they took it to ancient Greece, they taught Euclid. They taught Pythagoras. Pythagoras called it philosophy. And he taught it to Plato, who taught it to me. So, I have been tracking this knowledge for over 30 years, not just that, but the history of it. What bothered me was Plato, and I really want to draw your attention to this because this is really the most amazing part. Plato had an entire philosophical university. Like, it was called La Academia. And he taught Aristotle and Socrates. Socrates went on to create the Lyceum, a second university that taught nothing but philosophy. Now, between La Academia and Lyceum, both of those were located in Athens. So now I'm looking at it going, La Academia and Lyceum, they didn't have Kant. They didn't have Descartes. They didn't have the 2,000 years of philosophical history that philosophers today learn, which posed the question, well, what the fuck were they teaching? Right? I'm sitting here going, what the fuck are they teaching? Well, I studied it. And when I studied under Plato, just Plato, the education that I got was completely different from this book. Completely different. That book is not what Plato taught. That book is just a history of all the people who came after. That is not philosophy. Not even a little bit. What I studied was from Zoroaster, from King Solomon. Now, the three wise men, the Magi, came from the school of Zoroaster. In fact, they're the ones who I learned about Zoroastrian because I wanted to know who these three guys were. I wanted to know about the wise men, wisdom, wise men from King Solomon. So when I looked them up, they were referred to as the three Magi. Now, at the time, I didn't think anything of it. And later, when I started to do it, I realized, wait a minute, they're Magi, which means magic. The reason why they were following the star that night to Christ, that actually took 2 years, was because they were studying and practicing the art of divination. Divination. Now, if you look at Plato's curriculum, he has astrology on his curriculum. I thought that was really interesting. I'm like, why does he have astrology? And the reason why is because when you study astronomy and astrology, they go hand in hand with divination. And it's the other thing that was really fascinating to me was the order in which you learn it. It's literally as advanced as biology. That was the other real interesting curiosity about it, was you don't get to divination until you get to almost biology. And I'm going, wow, that's a really advanced science. So I realized based off of that there is no way Plato would have the frou-frou bullshit that we have today unless there was something legitimate there. Oh, if he had something there, it was solid. So I'm going, okay, so what's Plato's astrology? I have studied Plato's astrology. That is what my work is Plato's astrology. Plato's divination is completely different than anything else. It's the same stuff that the three Magi, the three wise men used. It's that stuff. It's really fucking intense shit. And there were a few other abnormalities that popped up that got my attention. And this is where we go back to King Arthur. There's a lot of things from there on where it got really interesting with basically the amount of anti-magic and anti-witch going on. And there's a lot that's coming together now. So basically, the Roman Empire descended upon the ancient Greeks, who were literally producing geniuses, magicians, and wise men. And I'm looking at this going, okay, they had genius, magic, and wise men. They were gods. It was literally like a god. It was a god school. It was a god school. That's what they put out there. They put out a god school. And you can see very, very clearly when the Roman Empire descended on them. The Roman Empire were mercenaries. A mercenary was basically, you might have a really, really good farming community. And this people over here might have a really good warring community. Oh, let's go Walking Dead with this one. So you saw Walking Dead? Of course, who didn't, right? Okay, so Walking Dead, it's after they arrive at Alexandria and they're going to Hilltop. Rick and his group are mercenaries. They are the people you hire from another village because they have a warring village. And then you hire them to go and take care of a problem for you. That's what they did with Negan. So you had a peaceful farming community, the Hilltop, and because they didn't have the warring community, they had to hire out. This is called a mercenary. This was very, very, very common way back when. This is how everything was done, is you focused on one forte, and that's all you did. The ancient Greeks' forte was wisdom, genius, and magic, like the epitome, the apex of knowledge and wisdom. And it was completely birthed right out of King Solomon's information. So they took King Solomon's information, passed through Zarathustra's followers, and they built this gorgeous, gorgeous genius, magic, and wisdom school that turns you into a god. And that's all they did. It's literally a full and complete dedication to knowledge. It's the preservation of knowledge. This explains so much about me. Finding your roots is really fucking important. And there's like a whole thing about you finding your roots, because you're going to have your genetic and your heritage roots. That's my Ireland. But you're also going to have your wisdom and your knowledge roots. And if you don't have your knowledge roots, it's really going to fuck you up. I know this because I have been missing my knowledge roots all of my life. And to finally have all this come together, I'm going, oh, this is where I belong. These are my people, which is why you have, where were you born? What's your heritage? But also you're going to want to know the question, where did you go to school? Because the school is your mindset. And that's another part of you. So mine is, well, now I know it's King Solomon, Zoroaster, ancient Greek, but really I connect with the ancient Greeks, and it's Ireland, which explains why these two things come together. And I couldn't figure that out. Now I know why. I couldn't figure that out for the longest time. And it's because the seed that I got was literally straight out of ancient Greece, which had roots to Zoroaster and then King Solomon. So now I'm going, this explains everything about me. Now I have a defined point of origin. You are going to need to do the same thing. Now, when you choose your alma mater, you are literally choosing what kind of a mindset you want. Did you choose yours, or did someone tell you what you were going to do? And that's a problem. So we're going to talk a lot about free will, because free will is a huge part of all of this. I was just reading this whole thing on Clockwork Orange. And my God, poor Anthony Burgess. I was reading his life and why and how he wrote Clockwork Orange. When I read Clockwork Orange, it was the most beautiful book I'd ever read. It still is. It's a fucking mark of genius. And when I read about the author, for him, it was a trauma. It was a trauma when he wrote it. It was a trauma before he wrote it. And then after Kubrick did the movie, it traumatized him even more. So Clockwork Orange did nothing but traumatize the author. In the book, there is a woman who is pregnant. She is raped and the baby dies and the woman dies of internal bleeding. That was Anthony Burgess's wife. And when he wrote the book Clockwork Orange, It was actually in reference to him rewriting his story about how the people who raped and killed his wife and child went on to get their karma. And so they created Clockwork Orange to put him through, the criminal, through a mental restoration program. After the movie was made, some dipshits then turned around and copied the crimes from the movie. And Anthony was so devastated to see the criminals copying the crimes that his book dictated from the movie. It was devastating. His greatest regret was writing the book Clockwork Orange. I have never seen the movie. I read the book and went, I do not want to watch this movie because, well, I used the fourth ethic. And I'm looking at, it was breathtaking, and I'll tell you why. The first thing is the language used. He invented an entirely new language for it. It was actually the first linguistic study where it turned my brain on for linguistic studies. It was extraordinary. I went, how did he do that? He created a new language, and within about the first chapter, your brain will have learned Anthony's language, and then you'll be able to understand the book fluently. And it literally one chapter. And I went, how the fuck did he do that? We do it with Maze Runner. When you read Maze Runner, they have a language. Your brain learns the language, and then you can speak the entire book. Now, when I sat down with Tolkien's Silmarillion, I read the first paragraph. Tolkien put me through my paces. I didn't understand half of what was said, so I read the glossary or the index, and then I went back and I completely read the book without a problem. Because by that point, I had learned from Clockwork Orange that you need to adapt to the language. But Tolkien's language in Silmarillion is so dense. Like, you need, holy shit. So I then listened to, or I read this article. There was a professor who gave his opinion on Burgess. There was Burgess's quotes, what he said about the book. And then there was my interpretation. Now, my interpretation of Clockwork Orange is completely left field from the professor who spoke babble, in my opinion, because the man didn't speak. He was trying to do philosophy without any knowledge of philosophy. And then there's Burgess. Now, Burgess wrote the book, so he is like Lord of all here. And he gave his opinion. He gave his full, well, not his opinion, it's his book. So he broke down everything that his book was. And I'm now sitting here with my interpretation from this book. I threw out the professor because he's an idiot. I'm looking at what Burgess said, and I'm looking at what I said, and I'm going, wow. It's amazing to me that Burgess put this out here, and then I took what he did, and I ran with it and had this whole thing. So, first of all, it was a linguistics study for me. It was an absolute solid linguistics study. But the other thing that really bothered me, really bothered me, was they're onto something. Why aren't we trying to do that? Clockwork Orange will actually work if it's done ethically. So I became fixated on how to do Clockwork Orange ethically. I became obsessed with it. How to do Clockwork Orange ethically. That is all I focused on. How to do Clockwork Orange ethically. Because that's the solution. They figured out how to rewire the subconscious mind. So I sat down and I pulled it all apart, and that's my research, and then I reverse engineered and I figured it out, and I'm going, I found an ethical Clockwork Orange. We can do this now. So, but it's not for criminals. It's for mental illness. It's for anything you want it to be. By the way, criminals are mentally ill. So boop, there you go. I got it. So I just went, all right. So I have figured out how to do Clockwork Orange ethically. Okay. Where there's not going to be any side effects. In fact, it's going to just restore you to where you need to be. So, and I noticed again his linguistics. Now I'm sitting here looking at Sophie's World, which is around the same time I read Sophie's World. And I'm looking at Sophie's World and the linguistics. This is fascinating to me, where I'm sitting here looking at how logic was literally embedded right into Sophie's World to teach you logic, to integrate logic into you while you're reading Sophie's World. While I'm reading, or later around the same time, while I'm reading Clockwork Orange, looking at the linguistics. And at the same time, like right after I read Clockwork Orange, I read Catch-22, and then I went on to Slaughterhouse-Five. It was I remember those 4 books. This was like the powerhouse of these 4 books. You put these 4 books together and it's like, boom, education. It was extraordinary. Sophie's World, I would put as 1. Clockwork Orange, I would put as 2. And then go to Catch-22, and then Slaughterhouse-Five. Those 4 books is like, boom. That's one of my courses, just putting those 4 books together. It's going to like open your mind. The next combination I'm going to give you is the movie Apocalypse Now, combined with the movie or the book Lord of the Flies, and then the movie Instinct. Those 3 films is another huge slap in your face, break your brain. I would recommend reading that first. I didn't. I read Sophie's World, Linguistics, Catch-22, Slaughterhouse-Five first. And then I read Apocalypse Now, Lord of the Flies, and Instinct. I was 18. That was 1998 when I did that. But in the other years, it was 1996 when I did those. No, it wasn't. Think about it, Anna. No. It was 1996. Yeah, it was 1996, 1997 when I did those 2. So Sophie's World, Clockwork Orange, Catch-22, Slaughterhouse-Five. And then you go on to Apocalypse Now, Lord of the Flies, and then the movie Instinct. It was fucking powerful shit. Like, holy shit. It was some of the most amazing stuff I'd ever read. Now, right around that same time period, I walked away reading Frankenstein. And by that point, I was looking at Frankenstein going, I don't know what you guys also, I don't understand how this is missed. Frankenstein is about the relationship, the responsibility of, first of all, the responsibility of a parent to a creation. It's also, and around the same time, you're going to want to read 5 Characters Without a Play, which again revisits the Frankenstein thing of parent to creation. But the other theme I saw, or without an author, without a play, that's what it was, without a play. The other theme I saw in Frankenstein was a man who could not accept death. This is a man who could not accept death, so he turned to creation. This was extraordinary. This was so powerful. So to read Frankenstein and then 5 Characters Without a Play, and then I would tap the Broadway show Into the Woods into this as well, but not that Disney garbage, the real play, Into the Woods. So I would do Frankenstein, 5 Characters Without a Play, and then Into the Woods. This would be another course that I have where that's all you focus on. You've got to partner the books together, guys. You do not read them independently. Stop disintegrating everything. You're going to want to integrate these things together. So when you start putting these things together, you're going to see an entirely different story being told. And then it's when you start to realize that you've got components and components that you're not integrating. So you're studying a component, but you're only looking at the component. You go over here, you study that component, and you're only looking at the component. And if you don't learn to integrate it to see the bigger picture, and that's the problem. That is like the thing you have missed in your entire life. Everybody has, because you're not being taught this. So when and that really was it. That's what we're taught. That's all we're taught in philosophy, is how to see components and then learning how to do cocktails with component cocktails. This is alchemy. I'm going to tell you right now, this is like the beginnings of alchemy. This is where chemistry starts. But chemistry only does chemical integration. Biology does all thing integration. Alchemy does all thing integration plus the magic aspect of it all. So you're going to have the chemical, the biology, and then the alchemy. But again, you've got to learn how to look at a component, and then create something new. And when you understand how to start pairing up, partnering up, and like bringing things together to create these things, it's a completely different everything. It really is. It's extraordinary. Yeah, it's extraordinary. So I'm analyzing love at the moment. There's basically this kind of love, and then there's this kind of love. Well, it'd be down like this. And this kind of love is very different from this kind of love. And it's supposed to be parent nourishes the growth of for a child. And then the child is supposed to nourish the growth down to their child. So every parent is supposed to nourish the child. You are supposed to love your spouse more than your parents or your children. Because that's where your stability is. When it's done properly, yeah, oh, absolutely. Yep. This was really fucking hard to figure out. Really fucking hard to figure out. I came from a pedophile environment. So trying to figure out the right who's supposed to love who was very fucking difficult. And everybody had a different opinion. And then getting out of that environment, changing my brain over, and then like calibrating it to the truth. As soon as I did that, it was still I just stayed away from all love until I could figure this out. Like, I'm like, no, just get it away from me until I can figure this out. And you basically have to, you need to love your spouse more than your children or your parents. And the reason why is because that's where you get equal footing. That's where you have your foundation. That is where you integrate. In order to integrate on that level, it's called bonding. It's the same stuff that molecules do. So you're looking at becoming a bonded molecule. Now, in the Roman mindset, that's where you get into codependency, and that's because it's all fear-based. But in the Greek mindset, that's not at all what you run into over there. So you basically need a community. And then when you have that partner, you bond on a molecular level. And then you form a circle. That's when you become a parent, which is singular. And then that parent bonded can produce offspring, ideally. And that child will then have the nourishing environment to grow, prosper, and then go on to find their own. I've been doing a lot with the point of origin, the psychology of the point of origin, and our roots. And it's been something very, very challenging. You have to know your heritage. But the educational system it's literally your cultural society. It's what cultural society you belong to, what wisdom pack you belong to. What is your wisdom? And I've done a lot of research on what exactly wisdom is in comparison to knowledge and in comparison to education. And it was very interesting to see where wisdom was on a whole nother level. And I need to stop looking for quantity. I walked into this program that I had, this whole plan with, I want to save as many people as possible. I want to help as many people as possible. And that's just not, I had to adjust my realizations, my expectations, and everything. It's just not going to be possible. So then I took a step back and said, okay, I'm not going for the majority. I need to go for, and I broke it down to people who want to grow. And then people who want to confirm that they are growing, they want to learn how to grow. So they want to grow, they want to know how, and they want to confirm or validate that they're doing it right. And that's it right there. It's people who prioritize growth and wisdom above all else. I'm getting this narrowed down. And whenever I come into a space, I think about my audience. And I'm huge on try everything. Oh, good God, am I? I'm huge on try everything. Dabble at sea, look at the results, do data analysis, come back, and then hypothesize. What do you think? And then I look at the numbers, I look at everything, and then I take into account my feelings, all of it. I put all of the components together, and then I form a conclusion. And then I replan, execute, do it again. This is scientific methods, trial and error. And I've been able to narrow it down to definitely growth and wisdom through truth, love, and logic. And that's it right there. Growth and wisdom with truth, love, and logic. And that's it. That is it exactly. So I'm starting to notice there it is. Like, there it is. It's all making sense now. It's like a massive, I understand this now. There's a religion or a group out there where they take logic, and logic is like Lord of all. Oh, is that the Illuminati? And then there is, see, I see all of this is making so much more sense now. Like seeing it all come together, seeing the big picture, seeing it all just like, oh, I get it now. So it's like ultimately it's Solomon's knowledge. It's Solomon's wisdom. And then it's the Illuminati, Zoroaster, and then those come together. And then that gives root to Pythagoras, which gives root to Plato, and then me. So yeah, this makes so much sense. I spend so much time going, I don't feel like I was ever born in this era. I feel like I was born 2,000 years ago. Now I understand why. Now I understand why. Is everything okay? Are you just listening? Oh, okay.
But you would totally rock like a flowy white dress.
Thank you. It's all right. Thank you. So yeah, I'm starting to put this together. So I looked at religion. I looked at devotion. I've looked at spirituality. Really, I have such a bad experience with spirituality. I'm at a point where that leaves a worse taste in my mouth at this point than religion. When I went through the spirituality, at least religious people are honest about what they have going on. I walked through spirituality, and it's wow. Just wow. I can't go back to that. So then I looked at the next thing of, okay, I've got the university, and all this really comes down to is I have this really important fucking information. Like, of all the information in all of the world, this is the shit we never should have lost. And my agenda is to get it to you. So now we're looking at, okay, how the fuck do I get Solomon's wisdom, Zoroastrian logic, like this stuff to you? And the best way I can explain it is it's genius school. It's literally magic school. and it's God school in one. It's become a genius, a witch, a god, all in one. Literally, literally. And that's exactly what Solomon did. That's exactly what Zoroaster did. That's exactly what Pythagoras and Plato did, which is why Christ walked away from the program being what he was. Christ went through this program. So I'm looking at it going, oh. And then Zoroastrian went on to literally influence every one of your religions. It's in the history books. Every one of your religions was borrowed from Zoroastrian, which is why they're all parallel. I found the common denominator, which is irritating as fuck. It's always invisible. It's always invisible. So when I got down to Zoroaster and I found out, oh, he studied with Solomon's temple. Oh, that makes sense. So I'm basically looking to revive Solomon's temple. That's what I'm doing. I am reviving the school of Solomon's temple. And Alexandria was an entire ecosystem of literally focused around Solomon's temple. So this is what I brought up yesterday of what is the human ecosystem. And we were going to talk about it, and here we are talking about it. So what they did was they took, just a minute, let me, and this is, I'm thinking, give me a minute here. Yeah, growth and wisdom are definitely at the top of the list. But to do growth and wisdom, you require an absolute truth, logic, and love, which love is growth, logic is growth. It's all the same thing. And it revolves around the 12 ethics. So what they did when they built ancient Greece was they took all of the needs of the people, all of the desires, the wants, the dreams of the people, and they literally embedded it into, they embedded growth, wisdom, truth, logic, and love right into the ecosystem and turned it into a nourishing haven of an ideal ecosystem for the people. And it centers around the 12 ethics. And I can see that. The gladiators were about the first ethic, courage. So now it's all right, you have courage. And that would be something like the gladiators, something that would challenge your courage. And then there's your self-authority. It would be an entire arena or an event that just challenges your self-authority. I have no idea what that would look like. I got to study the ancient Greeks more. I've got to figure that out. Well, that would be the Discovery Center. That would be you making choices and not autonomously for yourself. And then there is, yeah, it's all making sense now. And then there is self-regulation. Now that would be the pilgrimage or your journey and your voyage. That's the whole journey through the 12 ethics over and over again is your self-regulation. And then, of course, you have your self-law, your personal boundary. You would have your accountability. So, but every one of these ethics, when you're in them, you have to indulge on something. So you have to indulge on comfort. You have to indulge on food. At one point, you indulge on sex. You indulge on, well, bathing, pampering. Well, we're back to the comfort. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and put that up there. So you have the bathing, you have the food, you have the sex. You have the knowledge and the wisdom. But the 12 ethics were embedded into all of these things. So no matter what you indulge on, you got the experience you needed, you got the indulgence of it. And through the indulgence, and this is something that's very, very much missed. People don't understand this, is through the indulgence, what you end up finding, what you end up doing with the indulgence is learning moderation. Indulgence is the process of learning moderation. And if you take away indulgence, then you lose the ability to learn moderation. You're not going to learn moderation without indulgence and avoidance. And if you've been traumatized, you're stuck in the avoidance stage. That's when you become black and white thinking, is because you've traumatized. So now you refuse to indulge. So now you hoard yourself on avoidance. So you end up indulging on avoidance. Now you're acting out of fear. When you focus on avoidance, you focus on fear. When you focus on indulgence, you focus on love. So when you are told that gluttony is bad or evil, you're actually being told that love is bad or evil. And once you start to break down the language, and this is really it, at the core of all of this, this is language. This is how language was weaponized against you to get you to turn against love over and over again. And once you have these couple themes, these two themes, over and over, it's just so fucking beautiful. When you look at the dichotomy of good and evil, which we're going to just, I love Asa. When you look at the equilibrium, it's not an equilibrium. When you look at the struggle, it's not, yeah, it's the physics. I can see physics in this, between love and fear. And then you look at the language. You can start to see how the language was either working for fear or it's working for love. And what we're seeing a lot of today, is basically people who are for love, but who are using fear language. People who are wanting love, and they're all gung-ho about love, but they talk like they're afraid. They act like they are afraid. They have the same fear priorities. That's a big one. They prioritize what fear would have them prioritize. So they're saying they're for love, but they're talking, acting, and prioritizing fear. And it's all in their language. So as you start to learn the language of fear and the language of love, you'll start to see the separation where you're going, okay, you say you're for love, but do you know you're talking like you're afraid? Do you know that you're acting like you're afraid? Do you know that your priorities are actually fear-based? And when you talk or think for love, you focus on logic, wisdom, truth. When you talk like you're afraid, you talk about opinion. You talk about your credentials because you doubt yourself. You talk about feelings. You talk like you're afraid you're going to harm others because you don't know, because you have doubt, because you're insecure, because you're afraid. So I see a lot of people who talk for love, but they're acting like they're afraid. A lot of people are doing this. Spiritualists are renowned for this, where they talk love, but they act. They want love. They preach love, but they talk, act, and prioritize fear behavior. And they're so ignorant that they don't even realize they're doing this because they don't prioritize logic. They prioritize their opinion. Because they prioritize their opinion, they have no ability to assess that they are speaking, acting, and prioritizing out of fear. So now they're nourishing fear. They're literally nourishing the thing that they want more than anything, because when you want to nourish something, you have to talk, you have to act, and you have to prioritize it, which means you have to talk with the language of love. You have to act with the language of love, and you have to prioritize with the language of love. But if you don't know what that looks like, if you don't know what that is, now a lot of people think that being nice is it, but what you don't know is being nice was actually invented by narcissists, because being nice kills the self. But the self makes no sense. Self-preservation is where everything begins. If you don't take care of the self, then you can't. You've heard that part before. Let's give you something you haven't heard before. This is something I've seen so many times over and over again, where a mother will be pregnant and she wants to die to give her baby life. I don't know the right answer to this. I don't. In my mother brain, it looks like this. I want my daughter to go on to flourish. So I'm going to set the example of how to take care of myself so she can see what she needs to do to take care of herself. So I give my opinion. Oh, I got the answer. Self-preservation is nourishing others. That's what it is. When you self-preserve, you do nourish others, because now you're making sure you don't become a burden to other people. When you self-preserve, you are taking care of other people. You're making sure that you don't cause harm to other people. And that's really it. When you self-preserve, you are making sure you take care of you so no one else has to. When you take care of your needs, when you prioritize the self, you are taking care of other people. But narcissists don't understand that, because that's not at all the education they got. They come from a warring education where it's divide, conquer, take everyone down, dog eats dog. This mindset is the war mindset. Read the book of war, The Art of War. Study the Roman Empire's war tactics. Study Napoleon's war tactics, and study narcissism. They're identical. They are identical. Actually, Art of War is more love. It's really bizarre, but yeah, it is. But when you study war and you compare it to narcissism, they're so fucking identical, I can't even begin. Narcissism is war. It is everything that is the war mentality, because it comes from a war educational system, a Roman educational system, because Rome was founded by Romulus, who killed his brother. He had the mark of Cain. So you've got somebody who had the mark of Cain, who decided to create the city Rome, who created the city, the Roman Empire, which created literally the art of imperialization, which then went on to become your religion, Christianity, and your educational system. That's why you have school shootings. It's because your educational system is all about the mark of Cain. It's not just the academic disciplines. It's the application of the academic disciplines. It's the application that teaches you, not what you're learning. It's how you learn. This is such a huge thing in education. It's not what you learn. It's how you learn it. You will get more out of an educational system that is mindful about how they're teaching rather than what you're teaching. Now, I'm going to tell you right now, the ancient Greek educational system and the Roman educational system has the same what. They both have the academic disciplines. The what doesn't change. The ancient Greeks have more in the right order. It's how they taught that they're different. When I say I've got the ancient Greek educational system, it's literally the same curriculum as far as English, writing, math, grammar, history, science. It's all the same stuff. But it's how you're learning it that's different. It's the mindset. And when you start to realize there's a difference between the how versus the what, now you're talking about something entirely different. So it's not about what you're going to teach the students. It is in part, but really it's how, it's why. You must know the how and you must know the why. Why are you studying this? What is your goal? Now, a lot of people are going to talk about, well, your goal, according to the US government, your goal is to make them money by getting a job 9 to 5 so they can tax you 30%. That is why you go to school. So you can learn how to get a 9 to 5 job obediently and then pay your taxes without arguing. This is not news to any of us. We all know this. The teachers will tell you this. That is why you learn. Well, that's why the government makes you learn, because you don't have any free will in your education, do you? No, they took free will out of your education. There is no free will in education. So free will is the be-all, end-all of consent. When you have free will, you are now opening the door for consent. Without free will, you're a slave. Those are your options. Free will, you have consent. You now have power of choice. Without this, you're a slave. Those are your only options: freedom or slavery. With freedom, that means you get power of choice, which means you have the right to reject. Right to reject is the ability to refuse something without consequence, which is why we say, what is it we say, that idiom? Without fear of repercussions, or without fear of retaliation, without fear. If you can't choose without fear, you're a slave. You have no consent. Consent only exists when you are 100% free of all fear. Consent only exists in pure love. Only consent exists with love. You cannot have it any other way. If you want consent, it has to be done out of pure desire. Now, what's going on inside of a person when you have free will is this power of choice is the power source of your authority, your self-authority, your confidence, and your autonomy. All of these things go here, all of them. So if somebody compromises your power of choice, if you remove free will, you do not have self-authority, confidence, or autonomy. You lose these things. Now, these three things are linked to self-esteem. They are linked to the second ethical perspective. So if your free will has been violated so that you cannot choose, if you cannot reject, you are now officially living a slave. There is no way around this. So when the ancient Greeks built their environment, their ecosystem, it revolved around free will. It 100% revolved around free will. And parents were taught the value of wisdom, education, free will. Parents are the future. Parents get all the power. And when you're looking at wisdom, education, free will, when you are looking at prioritizing and understanding the value of these things, understanding why it's important is vital to prioritizing it in your life. It's all about the priority. And if you don't understand, if you don't have the education of free will, of consent, of authority, then you are officially vulnerable to abuse on every level. This is the only way to abuse-proof yourself, is to preserve yourself with wisdom, education, and free will, to understand what free will is, to understand what it is to be violated by free will. And once you start to go through this, once you start to break it down, it really changes everything. It changes everything. And when the ancient Greeks, when Solomon, when Zoroaster put all of this together, it was centered around all of this: free will, wisdom, the ethics, growth and nurturing, this ecosystem to make sure that a certain number of things took place. Because if this does not go on, Exhibit A, look at the world. So the first thing they did is they acknowledged that free will is mandatory. It's not negotiable, because free will is consent, is freedom. Freedom is one of the core pieces of human sanity and human need. Love is the other one. Logic, truth. Love, logic, logic, truth, and freedom. Without free will, you'll go nowhere. This is like, you don't have these three things and you are not going to be okay. You're not. You're going to have mental illness. You're going to be sick. You're going to get disease. You're going to age fast. If you do not have freedom and free will, love and logic, logic and truth, you're not going to be okay. There is no way around this. So they built an entire society around it to nourish these things. They revolved them around the core natural desires. They revolved them around the core natural needs for an environment for nourishing growth. And that was all they did. If you want a society, revolve it around an environment of nourishing growth for humans. It is a human ecosystem. So you're not really wanting a society. You're not wanting a government. What you want is a human ecosystem. The question is, what is the best ecosystem for humans? Free will, freedom, knowledge. Because if you don't know, then you can't do anything. If you don't know, then you won't. So you must have knowledge. You must have wisdom. You must have the tools for knowledge and wisdom. Because humans have more power than any other creature out there. We have opposable thumbs. I mean, we have more power than any other animal or creature out there. And we're not responsible at all with our power. We don't even acknowledge our power. Acknowledge. See that word again, knowledge. And if you're not going to acknowledge your knowledge and your power, you're irresponsible for somebody who has the power. You have great power. And with great power comes great responsibility. You have a responsibility to learn, to preserve this, to become aware of it. It is your responsibility. Every single one of us has it. Because without it, Exhibit A. The Greeks knew this. Solomon knew this. Zoroaster knew this. So they worked together to preserve it and to build it. And when they started doing this, what ended up happening was they discovered, oh, look, we can literally teach people how to become geniuses. We can teach people how to use literally spellcraft and magic. And we can literally teach people how to be gods. In addition to that, we can also teach them how to be resource generators and stop consuming because we're flourishing. So what they had was literally a genius school, a magic school, and a god school. Now, this warring culture comes along based off of the mark of Cain. They totally Trojan horsed them, came in, and then imperialized them and destroyed them. They built us a box to trap witches. They built us a 2,000-year witch trap called the box. It's a witch trap. A 2,000-year witch trap called the box. And in order to do that, there were certain rules. One is do not let your children speak. That is the first rule of the witch box. Do not let your children speak. Because the children are natural spellcasters. They will tell the truth. So do not let your children speak became rule number one. The second rule they made was do not suffer a witch to live. They destroyed and outlawed astrology and then philosophy. Now I know why. But this is King Solomon's wisdom. This is King Solomon's stuff. I got here and I noticed right away that Solomon's seal was here, but nothing else. Not the Star of David, not the pentagram. Solomon's seal is here. And it was amazing to me to see that here. And when I started to break it all down, and it all just condensed into this real smooth, oh, there's the progression of events. I was talking to a very, very wise man a few days ago. Massive amounts of education behind him. This man did nothing but education. And when I explained to him this breakdown of everything, he's like, I have never heard of this. This is extraordinary. And I'm like, yeah, this is literally the lost history. This is the lost history. And when you start to break down the order of events and you start to, it's there. It's absolutely there. You have to know logic to go, oh, that piece is missing. That doesn't make sense. Logic is the study to say the words, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. If you aren't saying that phrase on a regular basis, your logic skills are real poor. If you are not walking through society and going, what the fuck, every 2 minutes, well, that's exactly it. The reason why is because things aren't logical anymore. The logic has broken down so severely out there that it's not usable. It's literally officially unusable. This was something that I noticed I couldn't handle it. I was there at 15 years old. I was there going, this place is way too insane. I can't function. And I had to learn and figure out a way to function in my logic without, well, in logic. It's not my logic, it's logic in general. If it's correct, it's logic and it's truth. If it's incorrect, it's not logic. This is the dichotomy. If it's logic, then it is correct and it is truth. If it is not logic, then it is illogic, which means an absent of logic. And it means that it is false or incorrect, which makes it a lie. What is the opposite of truth? So you've got this, and this